All right, and we are live. And it looks like we've already got someone in here. We will wait for some more people. And for some reason, the Facebook stream did not want to work. So apologies for that, but it is streaming to both of our YouTube channels. Right, it looks like we've got someone, but I'm not seeing anything and I'm not hearing anything.
Hi, my name's Ed. I'm here.
All right, cool. So, Ed, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I've been following this Reddit group for a little while now, and just tried recently getting started on restoring. It's still something that's a little baffling to me, which is why this live stream seemed interesting. Um, and Yeah, I mean, I've kind of been lurking for quite a while in the Reddit group, just trying to learn everything I can. And, it's kind of there's tons of lingo and all these different devices out there, and I'm just sort of just beginning just beginning my journey. I guess that's the short introduction.
Definitely. Well, I've been restoring for like on and off for like 5 years now, and I've still got quite a ways to go. So we're definitely in it for the long haul. But
Right.
hopefully this stream will help people out. I think I'm gonna wait till maybe like 2:05 or something. See if we can get some people in here.
Okay.
Do you have any devices yet?
Yeah, so I kind of searched the Reddit has a list of the devices, and obviously it's tough to figure that out as a newbie, but I opted to try out the TLC Tugger just because it's kind of tried and true and old fashioned and has like the least number of confusing parts that I could find in a device.
Yes.
Um, I've had mixed results with it. I can use it if I'm not moving around, like sitting down, for example. I had it on for one day. I managed to keep it on for about 6 hours, on and off. But um, if I get up and walk up or down a flight of stairs, it's gone. Part of it's probably maybe just my limited availability of skin, and some of it might just be how I'm using the device or the device sizing. I'm not really sure. Um, but I figured it would be a good place to start as something simple, knowing that I'm sure, I'll buy more. So now that I sort of experience it for a few days and have a sense for what I would actually want to look for in a device after using one myself, I went ahead and just jumped in and ordered a handful of devices from it's a relatively new company, the Foreskin. I guess they're in Sweden or something. And they have so I bought their tugging device, their retainer, and their dual tension, just to get a smattering of things. Just kind of knowing that I might end up with some devices I don't like or I won't use, but I'd rather just get a bunch of devices and see what works and try to get a better handle of it. I tend to be kind of an experimentalist, so figured why not. And thinking about the money, everybody has their financial situation, but me personally, I'm sitting in my car right now. If I could go back in time and not be circumcised, I'd give away my car. So like
Oh
$200
yeah.
on devices is like, what do I care? For a while I was kind of hemming and hawing about the cost, but now I'm like, you know what? This is like such a small amount of dollars for the amount that it means to me that I'm just going to buy a bunch of devices and see what works the best for me.
Yeah, that's definitely my mentality too. So it looks like I've got to do some things about the video description here. Let's see, the join link is below your video picture. Okay. Let's see, I don't see that, but maybe. So I'm kind of a guest host at this point. I've attended this just like you did, like a couple weeks ago, and then I got invited to host. So I'm not sure if I can. Maybe I have to go back to the actual stream. Okay, there we go. So yeah, so Jordan, like I see the three dots, and then I have the edit button, but it doesn't allow me to edit the description. I realized like also the title didn't have the intact radio. Um, After I added it, I saw that in the Google Doc, so I apologize for that as well. But I'm not really seeing anything. I'm on the events page. I'm not really seeing where it's going to let me edit the title or the description. And I'm also not really sure about the join button. I'm not sure if you mean like the picture of me below the live stream or the picture on the events page, but I'm not really seeing it in either case. Yeah, I could post. Hold on. We go back to Reddit and get the link. Let's see. Yeah, this is the link I posted to the Reddit pages. But yeah, I've used the strap like you talk. I have the TLCX that has like the expandable little spacer things, so it kind of allows me to grow it out. But yeah, I used the strap a while, like in my first year of tugging, before I just started using like the dual tension, and it definitely got kind of worn out. But I understand what you're talking about with like when I was sitting down, it would be like fine, but then when I went to stand up or walk around, it would usually like pull it loose. Or if I had it adjusted to where it was tight when I was standing, it would be usually like too loose if I was sitting down. So that's kind of why I abandoned the strap.
Can you maybe describe your experience with the tugging versus dual tension? That's something I've seen. There's a lot of talk about it, but I haven't experienced both. So maybe if you don't mind sharing what the practical day-to-day difference is between the two.
Well, I mean, the dual tension is definitely the lazy man's way to restore. Um, I mean, it's much easier for me. Um, the thing I like about it is like I don't. There's like you said, there's not too many moving parts to it. I pretty much just I've got the spacers so I can force more tension onto the rod initially, and then I have the pushing rod, and I can adjust that to where I need to, and I've got a few different like rod lengths. One thing I will say about the dual tension that uh, the way that it works is basically to like push off of your glands, and that can kind of beat up your glands. So I've actually taken some advice from the forums. I've got like some toilet paper that I just kind of folded up, and you can put that like sort of as a pillow between the TLCX and your glands, and that helps out a lot because back before I was doing that, it wasn't like I would have to take it off a little too early, just because my glands would start to hurt before my actual like skin would start to get too tense. So I was having to take it off before I actually needed to. So I don't know, what device did you say it was? Because I did read something on the not on Reddit, but on the Foreskin Restoration.v bulletin about like a company that made one with like a little pillow.
So the dual tension one that I bought, I haven't gotten it yet. It's going to take like a month probably, but I bought the one from it's Foreskin. They're out of Sweden. I think they have some sort of pillow that goes onto the end of the pusher, and then it's a rubber band based tension. I think they have lock nuts as well. From what I've seen on the forums, the company has fairly respected products, although they're relatively new and sometimes slow to ship. But that's why I just kind of took the jump on that. The one I have now is just the TLC Tugger, not the X. Maybe I should have gotten the X, but also I was worried that I didn't have enough skin to work with to use the X. I can barely get the Tugger itself, as simple as it is. I can barely get it on and holding in the first place. Sometimes it takes me 15 minutes to get a good grip. So that's kind of where I started anyway.
That's kind of interesting. I don't think I ever, it's kind of hard to remember at this point. I don't seem to remember having too much of a problem with the TLCX, but maybe that's just because I was loosely circumcised. I always consider myself sort of a CI or an RCI2 to start with, but maybe I was sort of like a 2.5 because I don't think I ever had to do manual like as a requirement. I do like supplement with manual tugging, which I think is good. But yeah, I was able to use the device right out of the gate. Some people, I think I talked to someone in the last live stream who was like manual tugging for years before they could even like wear a device. So I mean, that's kind of sucky, but then people do see pretty good progress with manual tugging as well if you have like the time to do it, I suppose.
Right, and I think that's where I'm at. And as I was researching, I suspected I would call myself maybe a CI2 roughly. Although I don't know that the scale is that accurate in terms of the practicalities, but I felt like I just had enough to use a device, and some of it might be the TLC tugger. The way that the cone goes on is a little awkward. You have to do a little sleight of hand to get the cone to attach. Whereas some of the other devices, it's like it kind of folds
Or
up
like flip.
and
Yeah.
folds back down. So I don't know if anybody else has some perspective on those other devices. I'm hoping that maybe gives me an easier way of getting a good grip, because right now with the TLC tugger, it's like I can get the skin up there, but as soon as I let go to get the cone on, it's gone, and so that's why I tend to fuss with it for a while. Whereas maybe with the ones that kind of have this cone that gets inverted and kind of like flops itself down as part of the device, I'm hoping maybe that is a little easier to finagle. I don't know if other people might have a perspective on that, or maybe I'll just be doing a more manual for a while. That's fun too.
Yeah. Yeah, I like doing manual. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I've gotten so good at the sleight of hand, I don't really notice it anymore. I mainly just try to like I roll the skin up the device and then I kind of like finagle it and get it as far as up as it'll go and then hold it and then I kind of just slide that cone down on there. So
yeah, it might just be a matter of practice. I've only had it for a few days now, so I'll probably get better at it a week from now.
Okay. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because it came with a few different methods. The TLCX, it came with the strap, and it also came with like rubber bands and springs. So that's kind of interesting. I haven't personally felt that much difference between rubber bands, springs, and the pushing rod, but some people say it makes it a little more elastic. I also know there's some people who buy like just the retaining cone of the TLC, even if they're using like some other device. They like it in terms of retaining. It's pretty good. I don't know. Are you retaining when you're not restoring?
I do plan to try to. I haven't tried with the cone, but based on my experience of getting the device itself to stay reliably, I don't think the cone's going to stay. I think I just don't think I have quite enough skin to easily retain with that method. But that's what I'm wondering when I get the Forbear. That is a little bit, has an actual grip to it that I think will stay put once I get it on. So my intent is to try retaining with the Forbear from Foreskin, or at least try.
Yeah,
Because
I've never.
I gather that that's kind of an important part of the process. Although it seems like there's a very varying opinions. I'd be curious what other people say is, should you be retaining from an early stage, or should you maybe wait to retain, later when you get to like a CI5 or something?
That's a good question, because I've never really been able to retain 24/7 simply because of nocturnal erections. I guess I'm more of a grower than other people, but I can at this point I can retain through the night. Kind of, it will stay on, but it usually wakes me up when those nocturnal erections happen. So it's not really practical for me, and I'm at an RCI 4, kind of like mid stage, and that's still the case. So some people's opinion, see, should be in the waiting room of the video. I'm not seeing you in the waiting room, but then I'm not really sure what the waiting room is or where that would be. But I hope you can join, Jordan, or at least see the stream. In any case, though, some people do think that you should retain right from the start. That can get you the gland sensitivity back, even though it doesn't get the lubrication. So some people think you should be wearing something 24/7 all the time, either a restoring device or a retaining device. And then some people think it's actually better to just leave your glands calloused until a point where you can just naturally cover it, and that way you don't have to sort of worry about if you don't have a retaining device, or if you're in a situation where it might not be practical to wear something, you have that keratinization temporarily until you get restored to sort of block your glands from being overly sensitive with your underwear and stuff. So there's definitely not really a consensus on it, I would say. I guess it's just kind of personal preference. I guess like really all restoration is kind of you figuring out what methods work best for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one thing I haven't been able to get a good answer for, it seems like there's maybe different opinions, is if the retaining helps make forward progress on the restoration process. Not that you're going to necessarily be gaining skin from retaining, but is it preventing enough of that sort of re-loosen or recontraction to actually help you make progress, or is it really purely just a glands protection method?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most highly debated topics in restoration. I think most people do agree that retaining does not, in and of itself, create restoration. But there are some people who think that it helps. I'm not really sure. Some people think like, well, if it holds it forward, it sort of keeps it from going back, and that somehow induces more tissue expansion than if you were to just go restoring device, and then when you go to sleep, it's like completely off. But I don't know. It's an interesting question. I suspect it probably doesn't, but I'm not sure. I think there may be some truth to helping you keep the skin over, just because it does. I don't know if it even helps you get your skin to get more skin cells, but I think that if your glands becomes more tacky, there's some people who say that that helps keep their skin, once they get to a more advanced level, it helps keep it stuck over the glands, as opposed to sort of the keratinized texture. It has more of a tendency to go back. So, and that's not, like I said, it's not actually more skin, but it just helps to sort of keep it from retracting more.
All right, and I don't mean to hog the mic. I don't know if there's other people that are joined. I see, looks like there's 7 people. Do you know if they all can they can speak too, or are they kind of stuck in some sort of purgatory here?
It looks like they are. Yeah, it looks like they're on Jordan Errol's YouTube, because this is going out to a couple of YouTube channels. So I believe Jordan is supposed to be adding the link to the YouTube where people can join. He told me like this was kind of typical. Sometimes you're just talking by yourself. Sometimes there'll be one person show up. There's a lot of people, I guess, who watch the live stream that don't want to actively participate, I guess. But maybe we'll get some more people. Another thing, other than like the retaining cone, is there's these man hoods that you can use. These are pretty cool. They're actually like these kind of silk things that you can kind of put your penis inside. Okay, Jordan's added the link. Okay. I'm sorry, Jordan. I don't know what the waiting room is. Oh, there you are. Okay, I'll enable you. Jordan. Okay, looks like I'm unable to hear you.
Yeah, sorry, I muted it. I was in the waiting room a few minutes ago. I don't know if you just maybe didn't notice it, but it was, yeah, people pop up on the right side, and then
I
there's a
see
little
the
silence.
chat on the right. I'm not really sure what the waiting room is.
It's where you just clicked to add me. That's where the waiting room is.
Okay.
So.
Oh, that thing. Okay.
So yeah, I was in that space a few minutes ago. I don't know if maybe you just didn't notice it.
I don't think I saw you, but maybe I just didn't look.
Yeah, it could be. If you have it on full screen, you also can't see it.
Yeah, I've got it on the little window thing, though. where I can
Okay.
see the chat.
Yeah. It could be that I don't think I've had that issue before, but it could be that it didn't add it, or you might have just not seen it. Either way. But yeah, if people come and that's the area that they will be in, and
Okay.
then you just add them. But yeah, the link should be in the video description now, and it should also be in the chat. I think we also put it there, so you can see it there as well. So I have a lot of background noise right now, so I might have to mute my mic.
Well, let's see. Which CI are you all at? So I think I already said I'm at like a CI or an RCI 4. I actually prefer the RCI, which is a little bit different. It uses like sort of descriptions instead of pictures, but it's not too dissimilar. I think an RCI 4 would roughly be about like a 3 to a 4 or 3.5 on the CI scale, which is to say that I'm in the dreaded rollover stage, and I have been for years. It's kind of strange because I remember in like about a year time, I went from probably a 2 to a 2 or a 2.5 to maybe to getting rollover for the first time, just intermittently. And then I've kind of been stuck in this stage for like another 4 years, and I expect to be stuck in it for probably a year or two more. So it's kind of strange, at least in my experience, like a majority of restoration is pretty much spent in that rollover stage where it's like sometimes it's over, sometimes it's not, and you kind of oscillate back and forth. And that's one of, I think, the quickest misconceptions that a lot of people have to have cleared up is like there's not really a point where you have half a foreskin in the sense of like, in the sense of like it's just halfway over the glands now. Maybe it's like on average halfway over the glands, but in practicality, it's really just oscillating back and forth all the time, depending on temperature, posture. If you got to urinate, all kinds of different stuff make the flaccid penis go back and forth, which in turn affects your coverage level. And that happens in every stage, but it's particularly frustrating in the rollover stage simply because it's very difficult to gauge progress, because you think that you've made gains and then it goes back, it will retract, and then you think you've made gains again and it'll retract. You can track your progress, but it's more difficult to do because it's not as intuitive, I guess, as the other stages.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that there's a big difference at different times and depending on different subtle conditions. One thing I notice actually, which is really interesting, is if I like pull down my pants a little bit and have like a little bit of pressure on the underside of my groin, then it's like it actually feels like there's a lot more skin than there is. So just having that little bit of pressure there kind of, I think, pushes the skin up, which makes a big difference. So that's interesting. But yeah, I think I'm probably between a CI3 and 4. It doesn't get coverage very often. I think a big part of it is I do retain pretty much all the time, using O-rings just to pull the skin over. And so because of that, it does, if it's sticky enough and it's been there long enough, sometimes when I take it off, it'll stay for a little while. It'll usually pull back after a few minutes, but often if it's in the right conditions, it'll stay just because of that, and it'll stay completely over, right? But then eventually it'll pull back and it'll pull behind. So definitely I'd say between CI3 and 4, because it's not quite where it goes over half the time. I'd say it's if I'm not retaining, then it probably wouldn't actually go over almost at all, but it can. So yeah, I've been in that state for quite a long time too. it's really nice. I mean, it's nice that I can actually jack off now without having to use lube, and that really happened after just a couple years actually. But yeah, it's a very slow progress at this point for a long time. 5 years, I think now. It's been probably close to the same spot. I mean, it gradually grows, but it's like I don't think it's gone up to CI since then.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. One of the well, see, I don't really retain have before, but it's just I think you might have heard like the nocturnal erections kind of mess it up for me, and I don't have like the ability to really do it 24/7 quite yet because of that. So I'm kind of the mentality of like I'll leave it with its sort of rough covering until a time in which my own skin can begin to dekeratinize it. So accept me into the call. See, I'm just seeing like us three on the sidebar. So should there be like another person?
Yeah, you don't see him below that.
No.
You scroll down or something.
There's no, yeah. I'm just
really
seeing us
weird.
three. There's nowhere to scroll.
Yeah, it could be a restream error then. Restream does sometimes have technical errors. I haven't had this error specifically before, but I've had other problems.
You streamed to the Facebook. It let me stream to the two YouTubes, but for some reason the Facebook just wouldn't check.
Yeah, that might have been it didn't do that last time either, so I was going to fix that, and then I just forgot. I've had an insane amount of shit going on right now, but I need to check that to try to fix that, because I don't know why, but we already had that problem on the last show too. But I reposted it to Facebook at least.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't. I think it's Ivan is the name. I think. If you, I don't know if he can hear us though, if he's in the waiting room, but if you can log out and then log back in, that might work. So you could try that if you can hear us. Because that actually worked for me. You probably didn't. I probably just wasn't showing up before then in that case. If it's just not working. See if I can type to try logging out and in again. Yeah, I'm about at the last straw. I think maybe just using Zoom or something. It's also ease of use, because just making it easy to use is important.
You can record on Zoom too and then post it if the live stream doesn't work.
Yeah. I don't know if that would be easier or not though. Okay, anyways, I don't know how to fix that then if it's just not working. I told them to log out and log in again, but might just not be working, so
well,
yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So, sorry if we already dismissed, or if I missed this part of the discussion, but what are you both using again for your restoration device?
I'm using the TLC X.
Okay, cool.
And I just started like a week ago, so I'm very new to this. That's why I wanted to just join this live stream. I just saw it on the Reddit group, but I'm currently using just the TLC Tugger to keep it simple as a beginner. And I ordered some devices from Foreskin recently to try out their products, and I imagine that's going to take like a month to get them because I hear they're kind of slow to ship. But that's where I'm at, and I would call myself maybe a CI2 or a loose CI2 2.5. So I'm kind of at that range where I can use a device, but it's a little picky and difficult to do. But at least I'm not stuck manual tugging like some people are at the earlier stages. So I guess I had a stroke of luck there with a relatively loose cut.
Yeah, right. That's nice. I also actually started with a with the DTR, and then moved to TLCX and did some air methods, and then now I'm actually doing manual because all of the dual tension methods where you do inner and outer skin at the same time. I had tearing in my inner foreskin, which now has kind of created a very slight skin bridge with like kind of it re-tears every time I try to use anything that puts tension on the inner skin. So I can't do inner skin anymore, I guess, and I'm just doing a manual now. But I'm thinking I might still be able to do like a TLC tugger or something like that that mainly targets outer skin. Not sure.
Would you mind describing to the newbie here of what a skin bridge is? I saw that referenced a few times, but I don't know what that is and how I can avoid getting that. If it sounds like it's probably not a good thing. So, but could you maybe elaborate and tell me what I should do to be careful not to have that happen, or is it just dumb luck that happened?
Yeah. It's so a skin bridge is when there's like damage or tearing in the skin, where it's like an open wound where it's kind of like almost bleeding a little bit, or there's like red because the skin is torn. Then it will try to repair itself, and the way that it repairs itself is can be that it kind of tries to reattach in a way. I don't fully understand why that is. I think it has something to do with the fact that it's mucosa and it's originally kind of fused to the glands. The inner foreskin is fused to the glands, so it's like the inner foreskin is kind of it's creating a bridge between itself and the glands, and it's like becomes like a white or white sort of scarring over, and it kind of makes you can find pictures of it that'll make it much more clear if you want to do that. Unfortunately, we can't share those on here, but yeah. So the skin kind of reattaches itself in a way that it's like it sticks out a little bit, and it's more sensitive and can cause issues. And so anytime you have tearing in the skin, that can happen. So I mean, the main way that you know that the skin might be tearing is that if it's painful, and so you kind of have to be careful not to do anything that causes too much pain. There's like you can have some pressure and it might be a little bit uncomfortable, but it shouldn't be to the point where it's like pain. I don't know exactly how to describe that threshold, but yeah, it shouldn't be causing too much pain.
Yeah, and as a beginner, it's hard for me to know what that threshold is. My default has been just, when in doubt, just don't pull too hard. But you want to make progress too. So maybe you two could describe how, to a newbie, where do I put that threshold, and should I kind of push it a bit, or should I just take it easy and slow and not pull too hard?
Ron Lau promotes the 4-hour rule, which is the idea that usually you have to take a bathroom break at least once every 4 hours or so. And so if you can adjust it to a point where like you can last just the 4 hours and you feel that you have to take it off, but not too long, then obviously you don't want to have any pain. But if you can last that 4 hours and then have like a bathroom break, that's usually appropriate. I think I adjust it more for like the whole day, and I just kind of see like if the last day I had to take it off too early. They usually recommend about 8 to 12 hours a day. But if you're finding you have to take it off before that, you probably should loosen it up. If you don't feel any kind of tension, really, you don't, because you'll kind of feel, and you might have already felt it's almost kind of a burning sensation, but it's not really painful, but it kind of lets you know, like, okay, it's time to take it off. So if you can kind of just get to that point by the end, I think that's usually an appropriate amount.
one other quick question I wanted to get in there is because this is something that I think is going to be a big determination of my progress is, what devices would you guys recommend, if any, to be able to use, like going to the store or just going to work? I work at a desk job, so I can sit at a desk most of the day, but I need to obviously walk around, and I can't I can't have some obvious stuff showing. It needs to be discreet. So do you guys have recommendations for what the better methods are, that's comfortable to walk around and discreet enough?
I mean, I think the TLC is one of the more discreet ones. I don't know if it's like the most discreet, but I don't think I've had a problem. But one thing is, like, if you're wearing it in public, I think you should probably get Tugging wear. This isn't very expensive, but it's basically like a jock strap that catches the device if it falls off in public, and that's a very, very good safety method. I think it's a lot better than the sort of string that you pin to your underwear. So if you can afford a little bit of extra for Tugging wear, that's, I think, a really good sort of safety method for catching the device.
Yeah, my experience with TLC, the TLC X and the TLC Packer, which is kind of similar, but it's actually much simpler. It's just like one piece that you put on and then pull your skin over and then put a retainer on. So the TLC Packer or the TLC X or the DTR all worked for me when I was working and moving around, and I don't think I ever had any problems with any of those falling off, really. Or at least extreme, like maybe once or twice in the years that I wore them. So, yeah.
I was going to say, like, if you do have problems retaining at night and you do want to retain, the man hoods are also a pretty good method. They're basically like silk, sort of faux foreskins. I don't think they work as good as retaining because it's not your own skin, but they feel very nice. And it doesn't require me to pull my skin up. So even if you're a total beginner, you can wear those at night just fine. And it basically tries to sort of mimic there's like multiple layers of silk that sort of try to reduce friction. And so that may be a good alternative to retaining if you can't accommodate those nocturnal erections.
Yeah, I concur on that. The Manhood is a great product. I was going to mention that too when you mentioned the nocturnal erections. They're more comfortable, and I haven't had as much problems with them. So it definitely helps. Yeah.
Hey guys, what's up?
How's it going, Carter?
Nice to see you again, Wesley. I don't think I've met you in the right-hand quadrant there. How's it going though, man?
Pretty good. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I meant I was saying, I don't know the person who's in like the top right-hand quadrant, so I'm not sure what that looks like on your screen, but
you talking about me?
Yeah.
My name is Ed. I'm a brand new guy to the
cool.
Reddit forum, and I just saw a link to this, and I said, hey, what the heck, I'll just join the live stream and start talking. So
nice.
I'm a new guy.
Hey, well, glad to meet you. So I want to jump in because I heard you guys talking about the manhood and how that's kind of good for retaining. And the question that I had was, how is that helping you retain? I thought it's just more of a covering versus holding the tissue above the skin.
Well, I think the idea is that it's sort of a faux foreskin, and I think there's a couple different models. There's one of them that actually kind of looks like a foreskin, but I haven't used that one, so I
but it's not applying any tension, right?
No, it doesn't help you. It doesn't help you restore.
What would be awesome is a device that applies like a little bit of tension as well, but not as much as the other devices do, and it could accommodate an erection really easily.
Yeah,
there is one method that's particularly effective for that. It's with T-taping around. You can do that at night. So you can use that method actually at night relatively safely. But it's a lot of work. So
I think also the like over the shoulder method with the straps some people use because it's sort of elastic, I guess it can accommodate
right.
it.
Yeah, I'd like to figure that out or understand that better. But I do think it's good to take a break as well, obviously, from restoring. So that's a good time just to kind of retain.
Yeah,
However, I don't think
definitely.
we 100% know if that's accurate or not yet. Does our tissue need time after stretching, after tension? One thing that I'm trying to figure out is there's applications for lengthening tissue or growing tissue with tension that isn't just foreskin restoration. Like, I've seen something for a head injury. There was like a large amount of tissue that needed to be removed from somebody's head, and that so they a lot was removed, and they grew a lot of tissue, and they used like a implanted device in there to expand the tissue out a ton, and then they used that tissue for a skin graft essentially, or used it just to replace that area. So that's constant tension. That's not variable amounts of tension, or sometimes there's a lot of tension and then sometimes there's none. It's a constant application of tension, and they grow a fucking huge amount of tissue, guys. They're growing a lot of tissue there really quickly. And I'm wondering, I don't think this kind of medical engineering approach has come to foreskin restoration yet. I think there's probably ways to really accelerate the level of mitosis and make it happen a lot quicker. And then potentially with properties. I think the process of growing this tissue is kind of interesting. It's like you're hijacking the skin's ability to just heal in general. It's like it's really like the skin is expanding through a very similar process to when it's damaged as well, or when it's, this is difficult for me to describe. I'm still trying to figure it out myself, but it's like a natural regenerative process that your body can do. Obviously, we're tapping into that to grow new tissue here, but the properties of that tissue that's being generated like through mitosis here are potentially different than the properties of that type of tissue when it's in an intact state, right? So an intact man, the properties of that tissue could be a lot different than the properties of the tissue that we're growing here. That's still something that I'm trying to figure out as well. But there potentially is a way to get the properties of that tissue in the most optimal state possible. We even know there's the inner tissue, right? And there's the outer tissue. You want to make sure in some instances you're generating a lot more of the inner tissue than the outer tissue. And the properties of those tissues are a lot different. So anyway, yeah, those have been some of my thoughts lately on that. So I would like to actually try constant tension and see if that's possible to do like 24 hours a day, multiple days in a row.
Something I'll throw in, and I have to leave in just like a few minutes because I actually have to do a Foreskin community action group at 1 or in 10 minutes. But something that I noticed or read that was really interesting when I first started, like 10 years ago, or when I was first researching it, was that some guy did a study where it was a very small study, but there were like 20 guys, and he had half of them doing like full-time restoration, which meant like 5 hours or more or something like that. And then the other ones were doing part-time restoration, which was like much less. So it was like most of them were doing like only like maybe a few minutes or an hour or something. And then some of them were doing like mostly like 10 hours a day or like a lot. And he found that there wasn't any difference in how much skin they actually grew between the two groups. They were like identical. And so I found that really interesting. And it kind of jived with something I remember in an AP bio class, which was that once mitosis starts happening, it's a process that takes several hours. So that initial that tugging and that tension, I think, creates maybe some tension that encourages the cells to divide. But then that process takes time, so it doesn't actually matter if there's continually tension during that time or not. I think it might just keep growing. I'm not 100% sure about all of this, but it
Yeah,
seems to me
it's a
from my
great question. It's a
view
great
that
question that we should be
that's kind
asking other people, because it's actually obviously very important to know. We should know the optimal way to induce mitosis. That's an easy question to answer as well. We just need to be actively investigating it, or we need a group of people. Obviously, we need people who have a background in studying this to crack this code for us and figure that out. Because that's definitely something realistic to know.
Yeah, and to address like someone in the chat, regeneration is definitely worth investing in. It was about time to go, Jordan.
Yeah, pretty soon. I
Okay.
might jump out in a minute. Thanks so much for hosting. This is awesome. And
All
yeah,
right.
feel free to keep going after I'm gone,
Yeah.
obviously. But
Regeneration is definitely something worth funding, and we have that with like Foreskin, which is great. But we don't quite know yet how soon regeneration is going to come around. It might take years or decades. We don't really know. It could be it comes around in our lifetimes when we're like 80 years old. It might not be in our lifetimes. I hope it comes around earlier. But I do know that Forgin says if they believe that they probably can regenerate somebody who has restored, although they might have to remove the restored tissue. They're not quite sure, but I know on their FAQ they say that if regeneration does take off and if they have to develop a separate process for restored men, they're willing to develop that process. So even if you get restored, it's probably very likely that you'll be able to use the regenerative methods after that to get back all the stuff that we're still missing from restoration.
On the topic of tension that was brought up and the biological processes of new skin growth, I did do a little research on that. I work in the medical field and specifically in cancer, and we see patients all the time with post-mastectomy, so they had a breast removed and they have tissue expanders under the skin to basically regrow a pretend breast. It's just a bulge of tissue, but that involves skin expansion. And just looking at the literature, you're right that in the medical field, it's generally a constant tension 24/7, and they'll just add fluid to a bag, basically. Very low tech. I couldn't find anything that really described any intermittent tension because I think mostly in the medical field that would be very impractical. You don't want a patient inflating this balloon on and off. They would end up hurting themselves most likely. So I don't think there's a huge amount of data. On the biological front, there's some interesting information about inflammation and the role that plays, where it was a relatively recent study. I forgot what journal it was in, but they did this on rats, I think it was. And they found that macrophages, which is a type of blood cell in your immune system, are required actually for this process. And you actually need this tissue inflammation to get the biological signaling cascade started. And the recruitment of those macrophages to the localized tissue irritation ends up creating signals to do things like grow new blood vessels, for example, and it also helps trigger the stem cells at the basal layer of the skin to divide, not just to create more skin, but to create more stem cells as well, and that's what kind of perpetuates the growth cycle. So there's certainly a literature base out there. It's absolutely nothing to do with foreskin restoration. Nobody's, I think, studied that very rigorously at all. But you're right. There's tons of literature out there in the medical community and other contexts. So I do agree it'd be nice to try to take a science-based approach and come up with a good method, but it's the specific nature of what we're trying to do in our group is so different because of the unique challenges that we face in, like nighttime safety, for example. Like if you have a spot on your head that doesn't grow twice the size once in a while periodically overnight, it's not this moving target, it's just there, so it's so much easier. But I agree, it's something I've thought about. It would be so much better, probably, we don't know, but it'd probably be better to be able to maintain that tension 24/7. Because you're right, you can grow a lot of skin in a clinic, in a healthcare setting, in the head or the breast or wherever. You can grow a lot of skin faster than what we're talking about in our groups.
Man, head out, guys.
Very well said. I really appreciate you sharing all that. Well, unfortunately, yeah, we got it. How long were you guys talking before I hopped in here? Oh, I guess Jordan just had to leave. I guess we can continue the conversation for a little while if you want to. Cool. Well, where do we leave off on? Oh yeah, the manhood. Definitely an interesting product, something I want to check out because I want to figure out a way to retain at night. Or I guess I wouldn't really call this retaining. Maybe retaining the sensitivity, but more covering.
Yeah, no, that's the idea.
Right.
Retaining in general, we were kind of discussing earlier, there might be some idea that if it's used in combination with restoration, that it might help grow stuff, but if it is, it's probably minimal. Certainly used by itself, it doesn't grow any skin
In the
cells.
beginning, though, in the very beginning, I think it actually does kind of add some tension. Just being able to keep the remaining mucosal tissue or the inner tissue like fully above the glands, wrapped up in like a prepuce like structure. It's difficult at the lower CI levels. So I started out at a CI1, and I was applying a lot of tension just to retain. Just to retain took a lot of tension.
Yeah, and there's some
How were
people
you
who are
first
like,
retaining?
What?
How were you retaining when you were at a CI1? I would say I'm around a CI2, and that's something I haven't tackled. That is how to retain and what I should be doing.
Right. Well, I guess just the tugging I was doing was what other people would maybe just consider retaining. Like I had to use tension, a lot of tension, just to get it above the glands. So I was using T-taping method though to do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
but a lot of manual restoration as well.
Yeah, that helps out. And well, the thing with manual is that there's people who make a lot of progress with that just through these intermittent bursts. So it's a very interesting question as to like whether 24/7 is better or an hour or short bursts. I don't think we've really kind of come to the conclusion on that. But like the manhood, so to answer your question, I think, yeah, the manhood doesn't use your own skin to keep your glands soft, but the fact that it's like silky skin, or the idea is for it sort of to be like a faux foreskin, in the sense that it reduces friction and all of that, and so in that sense, it can help you maybe.
It's a much more organic environment for the inner mucosal tissue on the glands and, like, I guess on the shaft. Now that I've kind of actually understood this is a total tangent, but when your mucosal tissue is like on a circumcised penis, when the mucosal tissue is like stretched, right, that the trying to find a more elementary way to break this down. I know you guys know what I'm talking about, but the inner foreskin, that's like on the lower CI levels, it gets stretched out onto the shaft. So like a CI1 high and tight, all of that remaining inner tissue is like, even when flaccid, is stretched out and like somewhat taut on the shaft. Normally that tissue would be up all the way up here on the top of the prepuce. It's like in a permanently retracted state.
Yeah.
Very retracted state. And it's taut. And so as I've grown more tissue, it's obviously like wrinkling up more and more. And I've realized now, normally this tissue is supposed to be all the way up here at the top of my penis, pretty much. And it's just because so much was removed that the little amount that's left is like stretched out onto the shaft of your penis. So anyway, what I was trying to say is you should, no matter what, you need to keep that tissue covered to have it start having the properties it should have when it's intact. Because that mucosal tissue, it doesn't even really look like mucosal tissue anymore or mucosal membrane tissue when it's exposed to the elements constantly and there's friction. And it's not in like the proper mucosal environment. Like your mouth, that's in kind of an internal environment versus the outside of your cheek. So yeah, I think getting that tissue back to kind of the original properties that it has is very important. And it obviously the sensation completely changes when it's dekeratinized, and those keratin proteins are not like saturating all of that tissue. I mean, it really looks a lot different, especially under like a microscope.
Yeah, you're basically taking like a double layer of skin when it goes over the glands, and you're turning that into a single layer behind the glands.
And yeah, now we know that there's a spectrum to the degree of tissue that's removed. There's some people that have even all the inner tissue. I mean, there's a lot of people. Fortunately, that's not the case for me. But that's not an uncommon case for sure. And I think that makes a huge deal. Actually, I think that's a significantly that sensory experience has been even more compromised. And it's even more severe when there's no inner tissue left, even on the shaft, and it's just all the outer tissue. Like on an intact penis, if you retract it all the way, the mucosal membrane tissue, it goes to like the base of the penis. You can retract. So it's like really the whole organ is this sensory organ in a way when it's retracted all the way. But when you, when you're circumcised, some of that certainly is left remaining, but sometimes it's not. And all the mucosal membrane tissue is removed except on the head. And all of the rest of that unique erogenous mucosal membrane tissue, it's really like a specialized type of tissue. I want to understand this better, but how does it like interface with your those like that neuronal explosion of like what we consider pleasure? That's so confusing to me, how it stimulates your brain in that way. And is it just this? Is the actual what's causing the sensation deeper down, or is it actually the tissue, or is it like the pressure on the tissue? It's kind of confusing to me how that actually all works. But I think you could stimulate just the tissue that has been removed from us, like, and that could bring you to like an orgasm or cause intense erogenous feelings. Like you can just stimulate that frenular area or other parts of the prepuce, and that could potentially bring in you to an orgasmic state. So that's really interesting. Is this tissue that's been removed from us is like really causing that neurological response? I don't know where I was going with that originally.
Well, we've been told this myth that like, oh, men don't experience multiple orgasm, or men don't like we're under this impression that women masturbating, that there's so much more dynamicism to it, and that's true if you're a circumcised man,
right?
Not if you're in fact. There's some men who can absolutely, they can just stimulate their glands or their frenulum, certain parts of their penis, and they can have like a full body orgasm from that.
Right.
And I think one of the things that you're having this mucosal, the inner skin, that is going up against the glands in its natural state, which is a lot more sensitive.
Right.
Those two are making friction with one another.
I've heard it called like mucosal on mucosal contact. It's like so that is very important for the full sensory experience, for sure.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've noticed has been the biggest improvement for me, even just at like a medium stage in restoration, is that when you're circumcised, when you masturbate, like the skin stops before it actually reaches the glands, whereas when you restore, you start to get to a point where like, oh, it doesn't stop. It actually goes up over the glands. And it stimulates the glands like within your own skin. You're actually giving it kind of a massage. And that, I know that's just going to get better and better because I'm going to get more and more lubrication. It's going to become easier and easier for me to actually get it up over that glands without just like forcing it over. And the glands is going to become more sensitive. So, I mean, it's really kind of a compounded effect. The fact that you're putting pressure on the glands, massaging it through the skin, and the fact that the glands is so much more sensitive, when you have that covering while flaccid, that gives it that effect.
Absolutely. Yeah. Pretty insightful. I've noticed probably the biggest benefit from retaining, though, is I really don't think I've fully understand how this maybe impacts you more subconsciously, because, or, you know, I don't think many people are fully cognizant of that potentially. But when I am retaining, it's like a very different psychological state for me versus when that mucosal tissue is exposed. It's like a very protected feeling, and a calmness and a stillness. And it's not just because I know that that area is protected. It's like this very unique sensory tissue. And when it's protected and in the right environment, it really, I don't think this might be the case for everyone, but I don't even understand how it's not. This is not like in my psychological profile to have this tissue exposed and have a lot of it removed and really have a penile modification. That just doesn't fit my psychological profile or how I feel about my body or what I want for my body or anything like that. So this is like extremely disoriented when it is like that, when it is uncovered. So I found it like, it really helps me feel just calm, or it's brought like a calmness to my life that I don't think I really had in the past. And I genuinely do believe it's from this, you know, maybe not conscious understanding, but my brain did not like that this tissue was exposed, and it did not like that there was this deficit here, or you know, what I can consider a deficit. So from retaining, I've had like a huge change in my emotional state, not just because I know that I'm getting more tissue or things like that, or this is going to enhance things sexually. That's very important, but it's helped me cope with a lot of the negative feelings around this, for sure.
Yeah, I think I agree.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that almost makes sense looking at it through a slightly medical lens. I don't think you're making that up. I think a great analogy would be like somebody that loses a limb, like they lose a leg or something, and there's something called phantom limb syndrome where they still have an awareness of that limb, and it can even like have an itch or something like that, where they're, even though the limb is gone, the nerves are cut, there's no possibility that they could feel that part of their body ever again. There is a sense of something that's still supposed to be there, and obviously, I have all of my limbs sans part of my foreskin. This is why we're all here, right? But otherwise I'm fully intact as a human being. But it's not surprising that you're kind of wired to have all of your body parts intact, and when one gets removed, it's unsettling, and it feels wrong in some way. And it wouldn't, I'm just guessing, but it wouldn't shock me that even if you're circumcised at birth, and when you're 2 days old, that your brain was wired from day one in the womb to have all of your cells where they belong and all of your nerve endings where they belong, and some of them get cut out. Yeah, it's not unreasonable to think that actually has an impact on your state of being. And doing something to restore that sense of intactness, I think very likely is a very real thing, more than just a pure psychological thing. Sort of like somebody having phantom limb syndrome, even if you give them a prosthesis, or give them, like, put a mirror down so it looks like they have two legs and stuff, it can actually help them feel a little bit more intact, even though there's no extra, their left leg or whatever is still gone. If they have some sort of sensory input that tells their brain it's there, then it makes them feel more whole. So I wouldn't be shocked if you're describing kind of the same thing. A lot of us probably have that underlying in us, and we just don't really process it in that way, because we just, most of us, it's happened to us at birth, so we don't really know what it was like beforehand. Obviously, there's guys that were circumcised in adult life. It'd be interesting to hear their description. if they do feel like there's constantly something missing and feels better to get restored. I'd be curious to hear one of their perspectives.
Yeah,
I would
there's
be too.
definitely ones that like they describe it from going like from color to black and white, you know, and then they describe restoring as like something like 70-75% of the way there. That's their anecdotal experience. I don't personally think that we can put a percentage on it just because there's too much stuff that's qualitative. But there's definitely guys who have gotten circumcised, regretted it, and restored, and it's been very, very helpful for them.
Right.
That with adult circumcision, you have an issue of informed consent, because obviously if you don't know what you're consenting to, that renders the consent invalid. And I don't think that when adults choose to go get circumcised that they're informed about all the stuff it takes away. They're only informed about, well, it might slightly reduce some diseases. And
Right.
like, I mean, certainly if you get into surgery, the negative effects, and especially in the case of circumcision, it's not just with botched circumcisions. It's every person who's circumcised is far less sensitive in a variety of ways. We've just been describing them. They should be informed about that. They have a right to be informed. And if they still want to go through with it after that, that's fine. But I definitely think there's an informed consent issue with adult circumcision where people feel like my doctor lied to me. I was not given the proper information in order to make this decision.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know multiple adult men who got circumcised as adults, and they seem to be the most bitter and most upset, actually, about anyone I've ever known who's been circumcised and now feels it. However, the other that get circumcised, and it's, they believe that this has enhanced their situation in some way. And that's very confusing for me. And I can't fully make sense of that. I've gone out of my way to explore that side of things. And I came to a couple conclusions. One is that a lot of men who are getting these adult circumcisions, there is something wrong. There is a complication here. And so when I explored that and explored phimosis, what I found is phimosis can actually be very serious. Like, I'm not trying to drum up create a scare tactic here. And let me explain this at the very end. Let me get to the end of this point. It is a serious situation. A lot of the, who knows the actual metrics here. And this is all anecdotal, but I've seen many instances where people are to the point where they're seeking out a circumcision for phimosis. The tissue does not retract very much. Obviously, you know that, but why doesn't it retract very much? That's the question we have to answer. It's because it's been damaged significantly. Like the tissue is not retracting because it's like the properties of the tissue have changed. Sometimes we've heard that on infants, when you retract them, it can potentially lead to phimosis. Why is that? It's because the tissue has been damaged and it doesn't fully regenerate in the right way. I'd love if somebody can break that down a little better, but it causes the fibrous bands and things. The tissue becomes more fibrous, and I think potentially less erogenous. Maybe even it becomes uncomfortable and painful for people as well. So there could be serious problems with the tissue now. And in certain instances, you can stretch it out more, so you can begin stretching the tissue, and the situation does improve. But I'm wondering actually if this tissue, even when you stretch it out, it now is actually not really. It doesn't look the same even as a regular intact penis. So to me, it looks like the tissue now is very loose. The properties of the tissue also look a little different. So I wonder if this tissue is pretty damaged, and even stretching it out is a solution. I think the last resort is circumcision, but they might not, notice as much of a change when they have this serious issue with their penis. The tissue, it feels bad. It's like an uncomfortable, painful sensation. that is difficult for them to deal with. If you get a circumcision at that point, that's it's going to cloud your judgment on this potentially, if you think, you know, everyone's like that way, or who knows. But I do think it's going to impact your perception of this significantly versus if it was always functioning in the right way.
Yeah, phimosis is, I believe, the number one cause for adult circumcision. And the thing is, phimosis can be cured either through a minor surgery or through a process similar to restoration, where you wear essentially these rings that are progressively bigger that
Right.
non-surgically expand the tissue out to where it can retract. So you don't have to get a circumcision. That's a terrible idea. Um, but yeah, I definitely think you're right about that. If that's like the main reason, if there was painfulness and a dangerousness to it before, well,
Yeah.
of course, there's going to be a lot of men who say that that they feel better after circumcision because it got rid of that issue.
Right.
Also,
Well,
keep in mind that there's a lot of like cultural factors behind this. Even if you weren't getting circumcised for phimosis or an issue like that, if you're getting circumcised for like because of pressures, because you think your foreskin is gross or ugly or won't get you women, then that's a very powerful psychological motivator. Also, I think, you know, I just thought of this, but like what I've noticed over time with restoration, and I think one of the things that makes it more difficult to track is that it happens so gradually that you kind of, I kind of start assuming like, oh, I've always been like this, even though I know I haven't. I kind of start assuming like, oh yeah, you know, it'll roll over sometimes. And I forget that there was a time where that just wasn't the case. But it's happened so incrementally. Obviously, like circumcision itself is not incremental, but for instance, the keratinization of the glands is incremental. You still have like your gland sensitivity that you can stimulate immediately after you're circumcised, but gradually that will begin to decline. And so I think that it's possible that that incrementalism combined with the cultural stigma, combined with everything else, I think there's definitely like some psychological stuff going on for the men who say that they're happy to be circumcised. Not that I would ever take that decision away from them if they're adults, if it's their own body. But I mean, you are less sensitive. That's just a fact. Like, it's not up for debate. It's often treated as if it's up for debate. But
Yeah.
you
And
examine the
that, yeah, absolutely. And thank you for adding that additional context. And I definitely didn't want to make it seem like phimosis is the only reason why, you know, adult men might be satisfied being circumcised as adults, or that might be something, you know, that didn't negatively impact them. One thing that you brought up at the very end there was like people's perception, or you know, how much the impact on the sensory experience is going to affect you. So I genuinely think there are people out there where having a significant amount of sensory tissue on their penis removed, even with if they didn't have any issues, it's relatively inconsequential for them. That is not my mindset, right? That is absolutely, that's totally alien to me and us and a lot of us. This is not, that is radical. That's a radical thing for me, and it's not in my psychological profile at all. Obviously, that's something that needs to be communicated to the rest of the world here, that we do not find this advantageous in any way, and it's significantly detracted from our sensory experience. And that can be logically proven, as you can just assign value to the tissue that is being removed, in this case, that inner mucosal membrane tissue. And I bet there is a way to like understand at a granular level how that is impacting the neurological response through like brain imaging. I know that before I started restoring, I was having a very, very low quality sensory experience. Not even low quality, it was like largely muted some of the times. It's interesting because in some instances I have way more sensation, like erotic sensation, than other times. And I've tried to understand that, but I'm not going to get into that right now. Since I've been restoring though, I you know, it's like my sensory experience has doubled even so far. It's really making me concerned about how much was actually taken here, but it was largely muted in the very beginning. It was I could explain my whole sensory experience like through masturbation or sex, as it was like initially it would feel pretty erogenous. The sensation would be pretty erotic feeling, and it would produce those waves of pleasure. And then very quickly it would dull, though. Like for a little, it'd be like very weak in the beginning still, even though. So upon immediately starting, it'd be like this very minor amount of pleasurable sensation. And as I continue going, it would get weaker and weaker. What I was feeling would get weaker and weaker. And then it would get to the point where I was feeling very little, but I was still getting maybe closer to orgasm. And then, once I got to orgasm, it'd be 1 second of real euphoria and pleasure. And then it would immediately go away pretty much. And there'd be no afterglow. So my whole sexual experience was like this very weak, dulled experience. It wasn't really this, what I would equate with euphoria, even a lot of time. It had very little impact neurologically on me. I felt like it was just this dull motion up and down where there was really no kind of wave of mind gripping sensation that would like bring you into that state of euphoria. It was the whole time. It wasn't like my psychological state had switched. But now that I've been restoring more, it's like the whole time I'm in this like intense kind of animalistic type of feeling. And then it lasts the whole time. So it's like a totally different psychological state now that's happened for me. I'm not sure if I know that's the case with at least a significant amount of people who are impacted by this, but maybe not everyone. But it's really not even just about the sensation. It's like getting into that neurological mind loop. I don't necessarily know what it is. That's this very kind of primalistic feeling in a way. I'd like a better way to accurately describe that, but that has to be able to be measured in your brain. And I would love if that's the case, because what's going on in an intact man's mind and a man who's at like a CI1 and that could look very different on brain imaging. That could look very, very different. And I'd like to know that. I think it's an ambitious study for sure. And I don't know who would ever tackle that at this time, but I do think this is we would be able to potentially prove this objectively, or I think that's right. Like show actual imaging that highlights the response in the brain through stimulation of the sexual organ.
Yeah, I think that's true. There's definitely a lot of psychological benefits as well as physical benefits to restoration.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think that I have to go.
Yeah, man, sounds good.
I'm pretty sure. I think if I leave, the stream ends. But I think we've had a pretty good discussion.
Yeah, definitely.
Was thinking about doing this maybe on a monthly basis. Jordan's still going to do his stuff, of course. But yeah, I might come back next month and maybe we can talk about more. If you want more info, I think you're all on like the subreddit for restoration, and you can also go to foreskinrestoration.vbulletin.net. That's a pretty good forum for asking questions. Norm.org is a really good resource for restorers. So if you have any questions, there's a bunch of resources right there. But yeah, I think that just about wraps it up.
Cool.
All right. Thanks, guys.